Hello and welcome to session 4 of the marriage preparation course.
There was an article in the paper recently about a woman called Ina Marshall who was being helped by her husband John to open cards on her 98th birthday.
But amongst the cards there was also a telegram from the Queen congratulating her on reaching 100.
Well, Mrs. Marshall had no choice but to come clean. She admitted that when, 80 years previously, she met 18-year-old John Marshall, who really is 98, it wasn't done for a woman to be walking out with, let alone marrying, a younger man.
So the 20-year-old Ina subtracted 2 years from her age, and until the telegram arrived, her husband of 75 years was none the wiser. We like the title of the article, which was Toy Boy, aged 98, discovers his wife's oldest secret.
The question we want to address in this session is, how do we keep our love growing over the whole course of a marriage?
We sometimes hear people say that's impossible. Others say it's a matter of luck, or that it only happens if we marry Mr. or Mrs. Right, as if there was only one person in the world we could possibly marry.
But we disagree with that. We believe it is possible to keep our love alive and growing if we're deliberate about it and if we work at it. We want to look at what it takes to do that.
A marriage between two people who are lovers and best friends is a very powerful combination. And the friendship between us as husband and wife needs to be nurtured just as much as any other friendships. There are a number of things that enable a friendship to grow.
First, friends confide in each other. The other day, we were watching a TV programme about Queen Victoria shortly after her marriage to Prince Albert. She was asking her Prime Minister if she should talk to her new husband about political matters. She was worried that he might disagree with some of them because he was coming from a German perspective. Her Prime Minister gave a wise reply. He said, "Disagreements are not nearly as dangerous in a marriage as secrets. Secrets breed mistrust."
Secondly, friends talk to each other. Another English word meaning friendship is companionship. That comes from the Latin meaning taking bread together. And it points to the importance of meal times for building friendships, as they provide regular opportunities for conversation.
That reminds me of what happened when we went to that hotel in Scotland and left our children, years ago when they were much younger, with my parents. We went to stay in this small hotel in the Highlands, and we were so looking forward to having lots of time together to talk without the children around. We arrived at the hotel in the evening, unpacked, and went down to the dining room.
It was full of other couples, most of whom looked as though they'd been married for at least 25 years. However, apart from the sound of knives and forks on the plates, there was total silence.
And to make it worse, we were given a table right in the middle of the room. And so we had to sit as close as possible, talking in whispers, so as not to be overheard by everyone else.
Now, I'm sure that if those same couples had been out with friends, or even if they'd been at a party with complete strangers, they wouldn't have sat in silence throughout the evening. I bet they'd have made an effort to initiate conversation.
Sadly, that happens with lots of couples. The tragedy for many husbands and wives is that they don't realise their greatest effort should be made with each other.
Of course, that isn't always easy to do when we're tired in the evening. It can be so tempting just to sit down and unwind in front of the TV, and we end up eating our meals on our lap.
The problem is, TV dinners are a real killer when it comes to keeping love alive in a marriage. If we stop talking to each other at meal times, before we know it, we've fallen out of the habit of talking to each other at all.
We made dinner time very important. For us at night, to stop work or stop what we're doing and really sit down to dinner and have a full 45 minutes to an hour conversation about our day is good, because my typical way of communicating is flying in through the door, starting to tell him about my day where he could be in the middle of something and I'm rattling off for 15, 20 minutes and then I got the eyes glazed over and whatever. So I have to slow down and realize, you know what, we need to prioritize our time together.
And we do make a point to make that 1 hour or an hour and a half of kind of a shutdown from the outside world. I'll turn off the lights except for the light over the dining room table. And that's when our one-on-one private time occurs.
However long or short a time we've known each other, we can fall into the trap of not making an effort with each other.
It's interesting that a good conversationalist isn't someone who has the most interesting things to say, but the one who is best at asking questions. Good questions are the ones that are enjoyable to answer and help draw the other person out.
Eunice holds her heart on her sleeve, her emotions. I could tell where she's coming from, both positive and negative. And whereas I feel I'm very much reserved. I suppress a lot of my emotions, partly because of the way I was growing up, being of Asian descent, and my parents have been more of an authoritative figure where they really didn't care to hear my point of view and my feelings. So growing up, it ended up carrying through to my adulthood. Eunice helps me by trying to drag it out, by probing questions, and I'm getting there, but definitely I'd say it's a work in progress.
Asking our partner open questions may sound rather contrived, but I know they work. I love it when Nikki asks me something like, what would be your dream holiday? Or what have been the two most romantic things we've ever done together? Secondly, friends talk to one another.
Thirdly, friends have fun together. Friendship is built on shared experiences. Shared experiences lead to shared memories. And of course, pursuing those interests that we have in common will stimulate conversation.
Tony Campolo, the sociologist and author, says that the complaint he hears most often from couples who are having problems in their marriage is, we don't have fun together any longer.
That's why it's so important that we continue throughout our marriage to do things together, fun things that we both enjoy, and that may well have brought us together in the first place.
Something new that we've been doing is when we first started dating, we would always go on these adventures. And now that the kids aren't around, we're like, okay, now what are we going to do? Let's do some adventures. So we've been taking courses or going to cooking class. We're getting ready to do a fencing class that will start here in a month.
Hopefully we won't be fencing one another, we'll just learn how to do it, right?
We want you to turn to the first exercise, building friendship, and think about those things that you enjoy doing together. We want you each to write down 6 things.
So, for example, it may be a sport, cooking, walking, going to films, football matches, concerts.
It could be going out for a drink, exploring new places together, shopping or doing DIY. When you've finished, compare your lists.
By asking you to focus on these things now, our purpose is that as your marriage progresses, you can ask yourselves if you're still having fun doing these or other things that you both enjoy. The aim is that you don't lose sight of what an important part these are in building your friendship. And we'll give you 10 minutes. So, the first way of keeping love alive throughout a marriage is developing our friendship. The second way is to discover how our partner feels loved.
If I think back to the times I've felt most loved by Nikki, it's when we've been together on our own, particularly times that Nikki's planned and initiated, when I've had his undivided attention. For example, when Nikki and I went to Paris for 2 days, I loved just walking about the city with him, exploring, looking at art galleries, or simply having a cup of coffee at a cafe. Other occasions are more mundane moments at home, such as when Nikki makes breakfast on a Saturday morning, and we can talk and read the papers together without having to rush off to work. Spending time with Nikki is the most important thing for me to feel loved. For Nikki, though, it's quite different.
For me, I feel most loved when Scilla says encouraging things to me, such as when she compliments me on a talk I've given or on my carpentry. And if I've made something for Scilla, I like her to say something complimentary about it every day for at least a week.
So you can see I feel loved through the time Nikki spends with me, whereas Nikki feels most loved through the words that I speak to him.
Gary Chapman, in his excellent book, The 5 Love Languages, identifies 5 quite separate ways of expressing love to another person.
We want to run through what those are and explain how we can show love in these ways to our husband or wife.
The first way we can express love is through speaking loving, affirming words. Loving words means telling our husband or wife how special they are. We can encourage them, compliment them, or make sure we thank them for the things they do for us.
The second way of expressing love is through spending quality time with our husband or wife. Quality time might mean sitting down with our husband or wife to hear how their day's been, giving them our undivided attention and putting time in our diaries to be together.
We're together a lot after work in the evenings. He'll be on his computer and I'll be on my iPad, and we're doing different things in the same room, but we're really not together. We have to put time in and make it our own. I try to think of different things that are out there that I think he would enjoy, or we would enjoy together. Saturday afternoon, usually he's at his office working, and a few times he said, you know, I'm not going in. We're going to spend some time together Saturday afternoon. And so that's a real treat.
This past Saturday, we went shopping. And if you know how I feel about shopping, you know that. But you know what? It was a good day. It really was. It was a good day.
The third way of expressing love is through giving our partner thoughtful presents. This expression of love seems materialistic to some people, but to others, presents are a powerful visual symbol of love. Giving a present shows our husband or wife we were thinking of them when we weren't together, and it can remind them of our love many times over each time they use it or look at it. Of course, birthdays and anniversaries are opportunities to show love in this way, but giving a present spontaneously can mean even more. And presents don't need to be expensive. A flower picked from the garden and given with a note can express great affection.
The fourth way of expressing love is through physical affection. For some people, touch speaks louder than words. Our husband or wife may feel special and loved through all sorts of physical contact, from a hug, a kiss, holding hands, putting an arm around them, all the way through to making love.
Sometimes it is just the physical touch of her just, you know, touching my back or rubbing the back of my hair or something like that, and just letting me know that she's thinking about me, she cares about me, and just that touch sometimes can mean everything. And it doesn't have to lead into having sex. It just makes me feel a little bit more like, hey, I'm her guy, you know, she loves me, and she just wants to show me really quick that she's thinking about me and that she loves me in that way.
The fifth way of showing love is through kind actions, doing things for our partner. Kind actions might be routine things, such as cooking, ironing, mowing the lawn, or doing the washing up. Or they might not be part of our routine. When we do something for our husband or wife out of the blue, something they don't expect, such as washing the car, clearing out the cupboards, or making their favourite cake.
These 5 expressions of love are like different languages that communicate love. We've based one section of the marriage book around this concept, but we'd also recommend that you read Gary's book.
All 5 are important in every marriage. But just as we all have a native language that we understand instantly, we all find that one of these communicates love more effectively than the others.
When the boys were very young and Monica was at home with the boys for the most part, one of our Christmas presents, or Christmas present I got from Monica, was like ballroom dancing classes to get us out one night of the week. I could tell that she was needing to get out in public, which to me, I'd be perfectly fine at home, but I know that she needed to get out and be around other people. And so being intentional to know what your spouse really wants is important to me.
It's been such a helpful discovery for us to find out the order of importance of these expressions of love for each other. For Nicky, loving words are closely followed by actions. I know he feels loved through the things that I do for him.
For Scylla, quality time is closely followed by physical affection.
You need to work out your #1 love language in order to be able to tell your fiancé. You can't expect them to know automatically.
Some people assume their partner feels loved in the same way that they do. So they try and communicate love in the way they understand it and want to receive it.
But that doesn't work.
Which is why we may well have to learn our fiancé's language of love. And it can be just like learning a foreign language. It takes effort, discipline, and practice.
My mom's love language is gifts, and I knew that. And so I feel like I did that a lot for you in the beginning. I tried to do little things, and I discovered quickly that Aaron didn't need that. He just didn't, those weren't things that he really appreciated. Those were easier for me to do because that's kind of what I had been used to. And so I think then too, we were like, oh, quality time is our love language, and we were trying to do that together, but then we realized there's a difference in time and quality time. Sometimes we were just kind of like hanging out, but it wasn't like we were really connected and really communicating. So that was something we had to work on too.
Some of us have to get over feeling self-conscious, inadequate, or awkward. That may be the case if, for example, you discover that physical affection is particularly important to your fiancé, but being demonstrative doesn't come easily to you or wasn't part of your experience at home as you were growing up.
We want you to do an exercise now that will help you to discover the order of importance of these 5 love languages for yourself so that you can tell your fiancé.
We suggest you each write down 6 specific occasions on which you've particularly known your fiancé's love for you. They might be major events, or it could be something very small, but which was significant for you. For example, you might write down, I felt loved when you gave me that CD I wanted. That might show that thoughtful presents are important to you.
Or, I felt loved when you cooked my favourite meal for me. That might indicate that kind actions mean a lot to you.
Taking into consideration what you've put down, try to put the 5 ways of showing love into an order of importance for yourself. Then, without showing each other what you've put, try to guess the order of importance for your fiancé.
And when you've both finished, show each other what you've written down. And we're going to give you 10 minutes to do that. We'd encourage you to go on discussing the order of these love languages after this session. The order may well change, and it can take some time for you both to discover which is top of the list for you.
We're going to go on now to look at the importance of sex in marriage. We went up to Scotland and we asked people there, how important is sex in marriage?
I think good sex in a marriage is very important.
It's very, very important.
I don't think it's that important at all.
I think it's very important.
You think it's got to be good on a daily basis?
Yeah.
Very important. Good sex is obviously going to be a massive element of a marriage, definitely.
You haven't got to give it up if you're old, put it that way.
And don't stop once you've had kids.
Yeah, keep going until you're really old.
Absolutely, yes.
I think good sex is as important as those other facets.
I think obviously sex is a very important thing in marriage.
Sex has to be important. To keep everything going, it has to be, so.
I'd like to be married without it.
The sexual relationship is a wonderful way of expressing our love for each other. Sex is communication at the deepest levels of our personality. And it joins 2 people together, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually.
The sexual relationship both expresses the unity between a husband and wife and creates the unity between them. Each time a couple makes love tenderly and generously, the bond between them is strengthened. That's why sex is a vital and integral part of a marriage.
Sadly, the Church hasn't always given a positive view of our sexuality. Some theologians in the early centuries warned married couples that the Holy Spirit left the bedroom when they engaged in sexual intercourse. And there was one bishop in the Middle Ages who went even further. He told his congregations to abstain from sexual intercourse on Thursdays in remembrance of Christ's rapture, on Fridays in remembrance of Christ's crucifixion, on Saturdays in honour of the Virgin Mary, on Sundays in commemoration of Christ's resurrection, and on Mondays out of respect for departed souls. Hence the saying at the time, thank God it's Tuesday.
Woody Allen went to the other extreme when he remarked, "There are only two things that matter in life. One is sex, and the other really isn't all that important."
And we want to clear up any misunderstanding and to make it quite clear that God loves sex. The Bible portrays sex as a gift of God for our enjoyment.
There's a book right in the middle of the Bible called The Song of Songs, which is an erotic love poem celebrating a couple's sexual relationship. We're to feel no guilt or shame about sex within a loving marriage relationship.
But sex is not given for our selfish enjoyment. Nowadays, in our society, with its high level of individualism, the question is, how can I satisfy my desires in the way that I choose?
Everything we need for an exciting sex life available on the high street. Today we are bombarded by subtle and not so subtle messages telling us how we can achieve ultimate satisfaction in the sexual arena.
I think it's just the pressure of what we get from films and magazines. Sometimes I get letters from people that say, "Dear Mr. Parsons, I've just read that most couples have sex 2.7 times a week." I have no idea what the 0.7 is either. They say, "We don't have sex anything like that often. Are we abnormal?" And it's the pressure of the media. It's media man and media woman. Media man is rough yet tender, has equipment that always works perfectly. Media woman never has a headache, is never anxious, probably never has a period. This couple are at it every single night of their lives. And most of us ordinary people are just rushing to try to keep up with this incredibly false image.
Yes, it seems that if we're not having instantaneously wonderful sex every time we're under the sheets, then there's something wrong with our relationships, and it's time to look elsewhere for satisfaction, whether that be through an affair or fantasy relationships on the internet or phone.
A fantasy relationship can create a wedge in a marriage, and they can be fueled by being obsessed or fascinated with some famous person, or fueled by texting or email correspondence. And we really do need to be wise, because what may appear very innocent can get out of control and ruin a marriage.
The increased availability of pornography is also causing problems in some marriages. There was a time when you had to go out of your way to find explicit material, but now you can access it in your own home at any time of day on TV or computer. 10% of people who are seen by Relate, the organisation in the UK that deals with relationship problems, blame internet pornography for their difficulties.
We're told that the use of pornography can spice up a sex life, but in our experience, it often destroys it. Women write to me and say, "I've just discovered my husband is using pornography." And they will say, "That makes me feel less than a woman. It makes me feel I can't keep up with his fantasies. But more than that, it isolates him. I just can't reach him in this world of fantasy." Sometimes men will say, "My wife is using sexually explicit material," again in a fantasy world, and those men find it hard to match up to those images. And we begin with using pornography in what we think will be a positive way, but time and time again, it eats at the very heart of relationship.
The good news is there is help available for people struggling with addiction to pornography and fantasy relationships. The first step to recovery is admitting the problem exists.
It is very, very therapeutic to confess that you have a problem with it. And that's the beginning of discovering healing in that whole area.
The other thing about pornography is that it's self-focused sex. And all self-focused sex, whether fantasy or real, that concentrates solely on our own desires, will ultimately hurt ourselves and others.
Good sex is always other-focused. It requires the giving of ourselves in love and commitment, not for a short period, not for as long as infatuation lasts, but for life.
Sociologist Alan Storkey writes, "Trust is one of the prime requirements of a good sex life. When a couple trust one another, they can enjoy giving and receiving. But when one person might use the other, there is a tension."
Because sex requires us to give ourselves in love and commitment, the best way of all is to keep it for marriage.
For many people today, that's an outdated, even a laughable idea. Yet one danger of sex outside marriage is that it can cause us to relate at a surface level. Sex can easily become the basis of our relationship rather than love and commitment.
Our own experience was that waiting wasn't easy. Nikki and I had been going out for a year, and we were madly in love, and we started sleeping together. It seemed the most natural thing to do. We were committed to our relationship, and we weren't sleeping around. We weren't being promiscuous.
Then we both started hearing about Christianity for the first time in terms of a personal relationship with God. And we knew that if we were to make a commitment to Jesus Christ, that would mean stopping sleeping together. As a result, we held Christianity at arm's length for some time. Our fear was that if we stopped sleeping together, our relationship would drift apart.
However, we got to the point where both of us thought, as a result of all that we'd heard, we think Christianity is true, and we made a commitment to follow Jesus Christ as best we could. As a result, we decided that we would stop sleeping together until we got married.
We discovered our fears were unfounded. Far from drifting apart over the next 2.5 years, we experienced a new freedom in our relationship and developed a deep friendship that we were so grateful for when we came to get married.
We don't want to pretend that it was easy or that we always got it right.
I remember well a game that we would play. I would do something to arouse Scylla.
Which would cause me to do something to arouse Nikki.
Which would cause me to do something to her, and so on. And if we went further than we intended, it wasn't my fault because she made me do it. We came to realise that we needed to help each other rather than to lead each other on. So we decided to set ourselves some guidelines.
We decided it was better not to go away on holiday alone together, as we knew that that would put us in a situation of temptation beyond what we could naturally withstand.
We also decided it would be better not to stay somewhere alone with no fear of disturbance, as that would create a situation of intimacy that was better kept for marriage.
It may sound very obvious, but we also decided it was going to be easier to keep sex for marriage if we kept our clothes on and didn't lie down on a bed together.
Some couples tell us that they're keeping sex for marriage, but feel it's fine to sleep in the same bed without making love. But actually, that imposes a need to hold back that's unnatural and that can lead to difficulties after they get married, as they find themselves struggling to let go and to feel utterly free to arouse one another.
We all need to work out our own guidelines that will make our sexual relationship as good as it can be when we get married.
In the Song of Songs, there's a refrain that comes a number of times. Do not awaken love until it so desires. And it points to the need to wait until the proper time before arousing each other, because once awakened, physical desire is much harder to control.
There's 2 love languages that I feel most describe him. One of those is physical touch, and the other one is kind words. I know that when we took the course, we were dating, and we had to have very careful boundaries around physical touch. And that was challenging because I knew that was one of his love languages. It was like, I want to make sure I show you love, but I have to be careful on how I do that, and I don't want you to feel rejected because there are boundaries that we have to follow.
As we said in session 2 about commitment, marriage is about giving ourselves to each other for the rest of our lives, building something new together. It's both challenging and exciting. That is why sex and the marriage vows belong together. They are both about giving ourselves to one another.
We want to make a radical suggestion to some of you. If you're living together, think about whether it's at all possible to move apart until you get married. In that way, your marriage will be a new start together. It'll mark that moment of commitment as a new beginning in your lives.
And we want to suggest that if you're sleeping together, you consider whether you'd like to keep future sex for marriage. We understand that won't be easy, but it will make your wedding night and honeymoon more special and will underline what you're doing in getting married.
We lived together first.
Yeah, we lived together. We lived together, which was the way to, everybody said, oh, if you live together, you like each other, it'll work, but...
The worldly view.
I just think now that, 22 years later, we don't see it that way. We tell our kids, take your time, relax. But if you love them in the beginning, marry them. That way you have a lifetime to spend with them, instead of doing it the other way.
Keeping sex for marriage requires self-control. But learning to say no is a good discipline. And discipline is required in large measure in every marriage, especially at those times when we find ourselves attracted to somebody else. Keeping sex for marriage is difficult, but we believe you'll be glad of it in the long run.
They're expressing their vows in their intimacy. For men, see your bride, your fiancée, your future wife as a treasure, and to honor her, put her on a pedestal and be united together after your marriage. If you really, really, really love her, then sacrifice for her. Wait for her and prove your love to her by waiting until you're married. It's the most important communication you're going to do with your spouse, and it brings forth new life. Don't waste that ahead of time, no matter what anybody says.
None of us can turn the clock back, but the wonderful thing is that God takes us from where we are now.
Please look at the next exercise called Sex and Commitment. We want you to discuss your own guidelines for your physical relationship before you get married. We assure you we're not going to ask you what you've decided, but we suggest that you ask your fiancé what they would most like. They may want to keep sex for marriage, but are afraid of hurting you by saying so. But it's better to be honest. Then you can work out how to go forward together. And we're going to give you 10 minutes to discuss this.
Now we're going to look at what it takes to build a good sexual relationship in a marriage.
There are a number of secrets to keeping sex alive. The first is to see it as a journey.
God designed sex to be a journey of discovery over a lifetime. As our trust and understanding of each other grow, and as we deal with any difficulties we come up against, so the enjoyment and pleasure we experience in our sexual relationship can get better and better.
The cool thing is we want to have oneness in our relationship. We want to express love to one another. And what we found is the more intentional we are about spending quality time together and acts of service. And it's not about doing those things so that we get to sex. It's more about this is just what a great life looks like. And a fun and natural consequence is that the physical side comes along too. So it's good.
Yeah.
Being able to laugh together is important because we won't always get it right. And if it's not going right, it's not a disaster. Laughing, talking about it, and growing in our understanding of each other will bring change.
We want to say a couple of things at this point to those of you who've decided to keep sex until you're married. Right from the beginning, and particularly on your wedding night, don't expect too much of each other.
We wanted to wait till we were married to have sex. And so a lot was kind of like building up to the marriage. It's like we were really looking forward to that. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be perfect. Then we got married and it was like, surprise, we don't really know what we're doing and we're alone in this.
First of all, it gets better. Like, don't put so much of this movie expectation or this media expectation on what you're going to experience that night. Like, just have fun, enjoy one another.
I think so many people go into that like, okay, what am I going to get out of having sex? It's about me. I want this. This is the path that I expect us to go on, and I want, the ends to end here. But if you're going in it thinking only about you, it's not going to work because you're not going to connect.
We'd suggest you talk together about your expectations before you get married. Talk about any fears or concerns you may have, because it will help you to avoid possible tensions and disappointments.
What we mean by that is don't expect to become black belts at sex overnight. Don't expect to be able to turn on fantastic sex at the flick of a switch.
If it's not easy at the beginning and not at all what it looks like on the films, don't despair. You are not alone. One couple we know completely failed to have sex at all on their honeymoon. They sought help and now they have a great sex life.
Whether you've been sleeping together or not, while we're on the subject of honeymoons, our suggestion is this: plan as relaxing a honeymoon as possible. Weddings are usually emotionally and physically exhausting.
If you've already booked your honeymoon, please feel free to ignore what I'm about to say. Going up the Amazon in a canoe or crossing Antarctica are not ideal. Those sorts of holidays are not necessarily conducive to good sex. One man on a previous course had in fact planned a 2-week honeymoon going up the Amazon on a boat and had kept it secret from his fiancée. He looked horrified when we said that bit about a relaxing honeymoon, and much to his wife's relief when she found out, managed to change the second week to a hotel by a beach.
Another trend in our culture today is to compartmentalise sex, to isolate it from the rest of the relationship. But our sexual intimacy affects every other part of our marriage relationship, and every other part of our marriage affects our sexual intimacy.
It's interesting how much the discussion about sex within the marriage has a lot to do with nothing in the bedroom. It has to do with how you were during the day with each other. Was there a nice time over dinner, or just a nice walk holding hands, just something sweet that makes you feel really close. It has to do with what sweet thing was done that day. I mean, a guy in the kitchen doing dishes can be really sexy, It means that, wow, he's taken the time and effort to do something that I would have to do. So sex has a lot to do with nothing about sex.
Sex is not just the icing on the cake of a marriage. It's a vital ingredient of the cake itself. That's God's plan. The first secret is to see it as a journey.
The second secret to building a good sexual relationship is be ready to talk.
One of the reasons for needing to talk is that our sexual responses are likely to be very different.
It's no accident that it takes a woman longer to respond sexually than a man. If women were like men, it would probably all be over in 30 seconds flat, which would be very boring indeed. God designed us differently for good reason.
Understanding each other's wiring is what it's all about. And we're not going to do that in a night or a week or even a year. That's why we need to keep talking.
We recognise that talking about sex can be difficult at first. Our sexuality is rightly a deeply private part of our lives, and talking about it requires us to make ourselves vulnerable. But we can't afford to leave it to guesswork. The more we tell one another what we enjoy or don't enjoy, what turns us on and what turns us off, the more natural it'll become.
Being able to be open and communicating about the things that you desire and things that you want, that's been really good for us, because I think if you expect it just to happen, it's not going to happen. It's not going to just happen. It's good for us to be able to talk about the things that we like and the things that we expect and the things that, afterwards, things that went well, things that didn't go well, things that we liked and didn't like, and that's really brought us into a deeper, intimate relationship.
It's really important to be able to be vulnerable with each other, and that you have that trust, so that you can be open and tell your partner, this is what I want, and it's not like I don't know, that's like, it's important to make that step, or else you're going to be kind of locked inside and you're not going to be able to, I don't know, be connected. And I know that can be scary, to be able to be open and vulnerable and talk to your partner about what you want, but it's super important.
If our sexual relationship is to develop, we must be open with each other. The second secret is be ready to talk.
The third secret is be prepared to tackle problems. Most couples come up against problems in their sexual relationship at some point or another. That's normal.
For some, these problems will be the result of sexual trauma from the past, such as abuse or rape, or a past abusive sexual relationship. These sorts of things can't be brushed under the carpet. They will almost certainly affect your lovemaking if they're not faced and talked about together. You may also need professional help, and if that's the case, please don't hesitate to ask your course leader for advice.
For others, there are more common problems that can usually be worked through as a couple. As we address problems together, it so often helps us to grow closer. We want to mention some common problems that most couples will encounter at some time or another.
The first is low self-esteem and a poor body image. Good sex has so much to do with our state of mind. Low self-esteem works against our natural arousal instincts. All of us, men and women, are bombarded with the body-perfect image. It's so easy, even if we're not doing it consciously, to compare ourselves and our husband or wife to the supermodels and film stars. And hardly anyone comes out of that feeling great.
One of the most wonderful benefits of marriage is its potential to heal. A person's self-esteem can be built up through the love and encouragement of their husband or wife.
Telling someone you're beautiful or you look great, or whatever words you would most naturally use, on a regular basis will make that person feel good from the inside out. And that will definitely impact our sexual relationship for the good.
Another common problem is tiredness. Our sex life is so often the first casualty of tiredness, especially a few years into marriage, maybe when children come along or when our jobs are at their most pressurised.
We need to put aside time for making love, just as we encouraged you to put aside time to have date nights and to have fun together. Be creative in your lovemaking. Don't always leave it to last thing at night. Make an effort for the sake of your partner and your marriage.
Another problem can be different levels of sexual desire.
Sex over the years hasn't always been a smooth conversation, and figuring out what the right, well, not what the right thing to do is, because that's okay, but just, how often, because I think the men tendency is to want to do that more often than the woman would want to do. But we realize now that it's about intentionality. It's not about good sex, or it's not about sex. It's about the physical side of the relationship is a manifestation of the oneness that we feel together. And it's a reflection of that.
Love in marriage might mean one of us holding back at times for the sake of our partner. For the other, it might mean a conscious decision to give ourselves to being aroused.
Most sexual problems experienced in marriage are common and solvable. Things like premature ejaculation, difficulty in achieving orgasm, or differences in levels of desire. Our advice, if you experience these things, is don't bury them. Do talk about them together. And reading a book about sex together may help you to start talking. And we've put some suggested titles in the back of your manual.
And just remember, problems don't equal failure. Don't let this be an area that you don't address if you hit a problem. And do please ask for help if you need to.
The fourth secret is to deal with past sexual relationships. For some couples, past relationships can cause jealousy and mistrust between them.
Recognise if this is the case for either or both of you. Our advice is to be as honest with each other as you can, to face the past together and to talk about it before you get married.
I'd had past sexual relationships, and I found that was quite important for me to really have dealt with that emotionally before, and to have got over those before and sorting that out before we got married. Yeah. So it's something that we'd worked through I'd worked through separately, and also in marriage preparation. It was something that we'd covered and discussed a little bit.
Yeah. And it was important for me to know it was in the past for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you talk about the past, you don't need to go into all the details, as that could arouse feelings of jealousy unnecessarily. But it really is best to go into marriage with no skeletons in the cupboard. You might well need to say sorry if a past relationship is causing your fiancé to feel hurt, and then forgive each other.
We've already talked about forgiveness being something we must choose to do, whether we feel like it or not, and to keep doing so each time the pain or the jealousy resurfaces.
You might also want to say sorry to God, where you know you've got it wrong in the past and you feel guilty. Ask for his forgiveness, and then dare to believe you're free from guilt and shame, to move into marriage as a fresh start.
I struggled with pornography. It was sort of socially acceptable. Even though it was just pictures or movies, there's a feeling of unfaithfulness there that's very real. And that affected our intimacy. And it wasn't immediately evident. It was a lot of confusion on my part and Denise's part for a long time, until eventually, I was able to understand that this was a problem, get help, and really begin to try to recover. And when I did that, and then we kind of worked on it together, that really opened up a whole new purity, a whole new intimacy into our marriage that was so much healthier and so much happier.
If it seems too difficult for you to talk together about past relationships, but you know you need to, your course leaders will be very willing to help.
We need to bring closure to past relationships. That may well involve practical steps, such as getting rid of boxes of old love letters, possibly throwing away diaries describing feelings from a previous relationship, or maybe destroying photos, as these can arouse old and unhelpful emotions.
You need to assure each other that you feel very differently about your marriage to any previous relationship.
When she met me, I wasn't the man I am today. I was not a good man. I had several girlfriends, and that's why she wouldn't even talk to me. She's like, can't use the term, but you're not a good guy. And I'm like, no, I am.
And Curtis was in a previous relationship and had 2 children. That caused, a little bit of beginnings of drama, not knowing how to incorporate that or handle that. Everything was a little new.
She made me wait. She made me respect her. She made me understand that if you want me, you have to be honest with me.
Since we've been there, you kind of see what could possibly be that pattern. And again, accountability, hone them back in.
Definitely watch the people that you're around.
It's so much better to start marriage with a foundation of trust and openness between us. The fourth secret is to deal with past sexual relationships.
The fifth secret is to discuss family planning and having children.
Children will change the shape of your relationship.
Many couples have benefited from having some time as a couple establishing their marriage relationship first before trying to have children.
With regard to family planning, be sure that you've had a proper discussion about it and are fully informed about the implications of different methods.
The final secret of building a good sexual relationship is this: don't believe everything you hear. There are statistics everywhere as to what is normal frequency for lovemaking. Ignore them. You are totally unique as a couple. Work out together what's good for you both. And it's worth remembering that over the whole course of your marriage, your physical relationship will change.
Well, after 30 years, culture would say that's boring, right? And Hollywood sells that. There's nothing like making the commitment to one another that we're just going to keep working at this. And this is sweet. I know you like nobody else knows you. I know what you enjoy. I know how you're feeling. I know. It's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
And remember, sex is not just the icing on the cake, but a vital part of building a strong marriage over a lifetime. Our advice to you would be invest in it.
We suggest you spend 10 minutes now talking together about what seems most relevant for you from this session in order to build a good sexual relationship.
Well, it's time to introduce our guest couple. So we're very pleased to be joined by Saya and Jules, who've been married 11 years.
Well, welcome, Sarah and Jules. Thanks so much for coming along. One of the things we've talked about on this session is our love languages. Have those been helpful for you?
Yeah, I think realising that you give love in a way that you like to receive it often, and that's not necessarily what the other couple wants, the other person wants.
And for you, Sarah, what's most important for you?
Acts of service. So I would tend to do things for him, thinking that's what he wants, but that's not what he wants at all.
Yeah.
So.
And for Jules, what about you? What's most important?
For me, it's touch really, and just affection and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we've learned sort of to understand one another's different love languages and to accommodate. So, you know, when we wake up in the morning, getting Sarah a cup of tea is probably the best thing I could possibly do. Which I've learned.
He gets jealous if I stroke the cats too much.
And does it take time to sort of work out how to put these into practice, would you say?
A long time. I have to say that after 11 years of marriage, I've only really actually realised. Well, I mean, I knew that he loved affection, so he would smother me with affection, which actually made me give him less.
Yeah.
And realise if he wants affection, that if he actually draws back, I'll suddenly notice it's missing and give him more. So it's been a whole learning experience.
And has that connected to your sexual relationship in the years you've been married?
Always the person.
Who's going first?
I was going to answer that one. In terms of the sexual relationship and the love language, I don't think that sort of come strongly into play there, but I think that just understanding one another has been really important. And you know, for us, one of the things that we've learned is that, you know, the world makes sex a big thing, but actually what you've got to remember to do is just get on with it, have fun, realise that it's not always going to be perfect, you know, but you can always have fun. And I think that's made a big difference because so often it's just a big deal to so many people.
Yeah. Now, we said earlier that most couples come up against problems at one time or another. Has that been the case for you, and are there things that you've had to work through?
Yes, quite major actually for me personally. Well, both of us, because it takes two to tango, obviously. And we were married young. You know, we were the first couple. We never had sex until we got married, and it was always very painful for me. And you can easily accept a bad quality sex life, you know, and become complacent. And I just persisted, and it took 5 years to get a proper diagnosis. So I had to go from people saying it's psychological, knowing that it wasn't. So it was hard work, but I just would say that keep on going and don't give up, and keep on working at it. Don't expect it just to happen, and you actually need to be very proactive to sort things out sometimes. So.
And that problems can be solved and moved through, and that you can grow together.
That's right, and you have to believe in it. You can't. He used to get very frustrated and say, "But there is an issue, and we need to sort it out, and you need to find a solution."
Yes.
And you can get lazy.
Yes.
So you have to watch that.
I want to ask you one final question. If you had one bit of advice that you could pass on to all these engaged couples here, what would it be?
I think for me it would be to always prioritise your relationship above all other relationships, because if you're right, everything else is right. And that can be quite difficult because life becomes very busy, family demands, etc. And just making time aside for each other and making that the most important always, I think, would be the big thing.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Jules and Sarah, thank you so much for coming to join us.
Our Bible readings for this session come from the Song of Songs and Psalm 85.
Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot wash it away. If one were to give all the wealth of his house for love, it would be utterly scorned. Love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs forth from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven. The Lord will indeed give what is good, and our land will yield its harvest. Righteousness goes before him and prepares the way for his steps.
I'm going to say a short prayer as we close. Thank you, Lord, for the wonderful gift of sexual intimacy. We ask you to teach us how to use this gift to express and to receive love. And we pray that in each marriage and each future marriage represented here, love and faithfulness would meet together. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, we hope that you've had helpful discussions during this session. Next session, we'll be looking at shared goals and values. Until then, goodbye.